A major problem that I see when working with business owners is they're training the reps on the wrong thing. They're focusing on objections, but they ignore the one thing that actually determines conversion, which is discovery. And discovery is the backbone of both appointment setting and closing. But here's what most business owners miss, is that discovery is structured diagnosis. It's not just freestyling. And I've worked with over 30 companies in 2025, improving their sales systems. And the ones with the highest conversion rates all have one thing in common, which is a documented discovery framework that every single sales rep follows. So in this video, I'm breaking down the exact 7-step discovery structure that works for both setters and closers. Now let's dig in. Now, if you're a B2B founder and you're trying to scale your sales team, but you're still limited by your personal selling ability, fill out the type form below in the description and we'll identify what is currently breaking your discovery process. And let's get back into the video. Most sales teams that I work with struggle with inconsistency because they think discovery is just conversation where you build rapport and let the call flow naturally. But that approach creates a huge problem, which is every single rep is doing things differently. One rep might be asking the right questions and uncovering pain, while another rep is just skipping straight to the pitch and wondering why he's not closing deals. And the difference isn't talent, it's structure. Because when reps don't have a clear framework, they improvise, and when they improvise, they simply just miss key information, and they fail to build urgency, and they're handing you problems instead of qualified prospects. And discovery is where you build the foundation to actually close deals, because your pitch can be a 10 out of 10, but if you don't have a great discovery and you don't have a reason for the prospect to actually make a choice, there's no reason for you to have the call in the first place. Now, step 1 in the framework is going to be report and frame. And the biggest problem that I see with business owners and sales reps is they think rapport means asking all these bullshit small talk questions like, oh, where are you from? Or how was your day today? And in reality, nobody cares because that's not rapport. It's simply just low status bullshit that makes the prospect feel like you don't even give a fuck. Because real rapport is built by getting straight into their goals and actually establishing clear frame so that every single person knows what's happening on the call. And high status rapport means that you show up as the expert and you get straight to it because you have a bunch of calls. Because in reality, what closes deals is having high status and actually figuring out their problems, not asking them, oh, you're from San Diego, how's the weather over there? Which is complete bullshit. Now, when you get into the frame of the call, the frame breaks down what happens so that every single person understands the structure and what you're actually trying to accomplish together. And when you set proper frame clearly, the prospect feels safe because they know exactly what to expect. They're not wondering if you're going to ambush them with the pitch or simply just waste their time with bullshit questions. And you're saying specifically, hey, I'm here to understand your situation. I'll tell you if we can help you. And if we can't, we'll both move on. And it's high status, it's professional. That's exactly what builds trust. So, for example, instead of you saying, hey man, where are you from? You simply open the call by acknowledging that they booked the time and then immediately setting the frame so they know exactly what this conversation looks like. Now, with frame and building rapport, you're not starting the conversation with, hey man, how's the weather out there? You're simply getting straight to it. It's like, hey John, looks like you booked in some time to learn more about what we do over here. And it looks like you had issues with X, Y, and Z. Does that sound right? You're going to say yes. Like, okay, cool. And what that does right off the bat is simply just removes pressure from the prospect so that they don't feel like they're being sold to. It establishes your authority so that they know that you're the expert in the room. And then from there, you're going to get into the frame. So what the frame looks like is, hey, just to set the frame of this call is really for me to get an idea of your setup, your workflow, and where you're looking to go. If I feel like we can help you out, I'll show you how it works. But if not, no worries. At the end of the call, I just want you to get a better understanding of what we do. Sound fair enough? And why this works is because it positions you as the evaluator instead of a seller, which changes the entire dynamic of the conversation. And without this framing, the call just feels random and the prospect is just going to get defensive. But with this framing, the call is actual structure and they stay open to the conversation. Now, once you get into the frame and rapport, step number 2 is going to be what prompted the call. Hey, out of curiosity, what made you want to take a look at our company now instead of just sticking with what you're already currently using? And all this does is you immediately get into discovery and figure out what their actual motivations are. Now, for you as a sales rep, your job is just to break down why they're actually looking. And then from there, you're going to get deeper and deeper into the discovery. And with this framework, you got to look at it like it's an iceberg. The report and frame, very, very surface level questions, why they booked the call, it's going to be more surface level conversations. But as you get deeper into this, the prospect is going to get deeper and deeper into their emotions, into their whole reasoning as far as why they're on this call. And you as a sales rep, your whole job is just to listen and to get them to emotionally connect why they want to get their problem solved as soon as possible. Now, step 3 is going to be, you're going to be exploring their tools and workflows. So this is you just figuring out what they're currently using. So it's like, hey, what are you using right now? How long have you been using it? What do you like about it? What's missing? How is it affecting your team's efficiency or your ability to grow? And the reason this works is because this is where you uncover friction, not features. Because friction is what actually motivates people to change. You can see what they're using right now, what the actual problems are, and then you can build a gap from where they are right now to where they want to be so far that the close is inevitable. But the reality is you have to figure out these more surface level questions about what type of tools they're using before you can actually make the contrast when you're in your pitch. And this is where it all starts. You got to build a foundation up first and then get deeper as far as where they want to go and why they can't stay with what they're currently using. Now, step 4, you're going to get their desired outcomes. So you're going to ask, hey, when it comes to solving this category of pain, what's the main thing that you're hoping to fix or improve? Or why is getting that fixed now important, not months from now? And this is why now question is the difference between passive interest and actual urgency, is because it actually forces them to articulate why this matters in their world right now and why they have to make a decision. And setters use this to justify booking with a specialist, but closers use this to justify moving forward with the purchase. And no urgency equals no movement. So this is a question that exactly determines whether they're actually motivated or simply they're just tire kicking. But even then, majority of times when prospects are saying surface level pain, you as a sales rep have to clarify with them. A couple things you can do is if a prospect is giving you more surface level answers, you can't just accept it. You got to act confused so that the prospect can go ahead and justify. For example, if a prospect says, oh, well, the tools that we're using are just okay. It's like, oh, well, I guess, what do you mean by okay? And this is ultimately going to have the prospect open up because people want to be heard. So you can't just accept surface level answers. You got to let them talk more. And the way you do that is by acting confused. Step number 2, if a prospect is still giving you very, very surface level information, the easiest tip that you can do outside of asking those clarifying questions is simply by staying put and remaining silent. I'd say 2 seconds after the prospect gives you an answer. They give you an answer, silence. And what this does is people get uncomfortable with silence and they're going to fill it up with more information. And the more data that you have in the conversation, the more leverage you have in your pitch. Now, step 5 in discovery is going to be getting your tangible problem and actually pulling experience from the conversation. And the reason why this works so well is because you're actually figuring out what happened for them to realize that they have an issue and that they need to make the change. And psychologically, the reason this works so well is because people relive pain when they start to talk about the story that happened. And it's exactly why therapists ask, hey, can you take me to a time when you realized that you were depressed or you realized that you were traumatized? When people start to relive the moment, they start to relive pain. And these are the exact questions you're going to ask. For example, you're going to ask, hey, what's the biggest pain point right now when it comes to the work that you're replacing? And if they're vague, you're going to go ahead and say, hey, give them suggestions. Most people I talk to are either dealing with this issue, or this issue. Does any of that sound familiar? Then the prospect is going to say, yeah, it does. And they're going to start to open up. And what you're doing is you're simply narrowing the field and helping them articulate what they feel. And then from there, you're going to ask, hey, what have you noticed about your current process that's making it more painful than it should be? Have you tried fixing it before? What happened? And while this works, it's because it builds contrast, because if they've already failed before, they're more open to change. And like I said, when prospects are taking you back to a specific time when they had an issue, they're going to start to relive the pain. For example, let's say you are a marketing agency and you're selling your services. If you ask, hey, when was the exact moment that you realized that your current marketing team is not crushing it right now? And they're going to say, well, there was 1 week where I looked back at my budget and I spent $5,000 in ads and we didn't have any qualified deals coming through. And from there, they're reliving the pain and you're going to get them to feel way worse about the situation. And now they're going to think, well, shit, now I really do need to replace my marketing team and take this lead. Now, step 6 is going to be your consequence questions. For example, hey, let me ask you this. What happens if things stay how they are 3 to 6 months from now and you don't make any changes to the way that you're handling this? And these questions are so powerful because they allow the prospect to think in consequence, hence why they're called consequence questions. And the reality is most people would rather make a change out of fear out of losing something than gaining something. And that's why these questions are so great, because people would rather not fail versus gain something. And this is exactly what that does. Another great consequence question that you can ask is, hey, do you think it'll eventually slow things down, or does it just stay annoying? Does that end up costing you time, money, or just added stress on your team? Or, hey, what's the risk if nothing changes? Or here's another one. If that keeps happening month after month, how big of a problem does it become? And the reason why this works, like I said, is because it creates internal pressure and not sales pressure. And internal pressure is actually what converts. People are going to make changes in their lives way more from internal pressure versus someone from the outside creating pressure. For example, if you want to stop drinking alcohol, what's going to work better? You being insanely hungover Sunday morning and not wanting to feel like this anymore, or someone telling you, hey, alcohol is bad? Probably the first decision. So that's why consequence questions are so great, because it's not you telling them, hey, you need to make this change right now or in 6 months it's going to happen. You're simply just asking them and you're getting the words straight out of their mouth. Now, step 7 and the last of your discovery framework is going to be financial alignment questions. Now, sometimes this can be optional depending if you're setting appointments or closing. A lot of times for our closers, they already know what the budget is going to be, so they're not actually going to ask this. But if you are in discovery mode as an appointment setter, you 100% need to financially qualify before you set any appointment. And the way most people do this is incorrect. For financial alignment, they'll say, hey, what's your budget on this? Yada, yada, yada. But in reality, that just puts you in a hole, because if someone says, oh, $1,000 and your item is $5,000, essentially you have to sell that gap. But if you frame it as something like this, hey, by the way, if we're able to solve this bottleneck, something like this is going to range anything from $2,000 to $10,000, just depending on the level of support or what you need specifically. If this made absolute sense for you and you're absolutely certain that we can help you fix this bottleneck, would you have access to this capital? And the reason this financial framing works so well is because you're not saying, hey, what's your budget? Or, hey, what we sell as X, Y, and Z price. You're simply saying, hey, if we were able to solve your problems, so you're getting them back into problem-solving thinking, and then you're saying, this is going to cost anything from this much to this much. You're just giving them a range. You're saying, would you have access to this capital if you were absolutely certain? And then if you were able to pull enough pain out of the prospect, like I said, this typically works for appointment setting calls. They're going to say, yeah, of course, I'll have that. We'll have to see on the call. And then from there, you go ahead and book them in. But in reality, a lot of times, if you're a closer, these type of questions are going to be optional, just because you should already have an understanding, if you have good setters, of how much they have. But I like to include the step 7 because we work with a lot of big setting teams. And one of the biggest bottlenecks is just setters not doing step number 7, which is figuring out if their client is actually qualified financially, and they're just setting a bunch of dog shit appointments. So this is exactly why we do this, but this is how you actually figure out if they have the capital versus if they don't. And notice how I say capital. We're not saying, we're not saying money. We're not using low few words. We're talking to a higher demographic. We're saying capital because every single thing that you sell, you got to treat it like an investment, okay? Not as an expense. Now, this whole framework works because it follows a psychological progression that builds urgency naturally instead of forcing it artificially. You start with context and framing so the prospect feels safe. Then you surface the reason for being there, and you simply diagnose their environment so you understand what's broken. After that, you simply identify what outcome they want. Then you get them to articulate their pain out loud. Then you show them the consequence of doing nothing. Then if you're a setter, you're going ahead and financially qualifying them. And at every single step, the prospect is moving closer to a decision because they're discovering their own pain, not because you're selling to them. And when reps follow this structure, deals close way faster and objections disappear because the prospects have already convinced themselves that they need to fix the pain, especially when you're doing a good job of anchoring the pain in the consequence questions. So now, setters use this same framework and then transition into a closer, and closers use it and present the solution. And the framework of discovery doesn't change on both ends, only the endpoint. And this is the big difference between freestyle selling, where reps improvise and hope something lands, versus actually structured selling, where every single step moves a conversation towards the decision. And in reality, for any single sales team, whether you're a business owner building your own sales team, whether you're a sales manager training your own sales team, or if you're a closer, you have to be discovery oriented first, because figuring out their problems and making the gap between where they are right now to where they want to be so wide, it's going to be so easy to sell. And I've seen a lot of sales teams, they build out a huge presentation for a pitch and they take 20 minutes doing the pitch, but they did a dog shit job of actually getting the prospect to articulate their pain out. If you do a great job of discovery and follow this exact framework, your pitch only needs to be about 5 minutes. And if you're able to solve 2 or 3 bottlenecks that they talk about in the discovery, it's going to be way easier to sell. Because like I said, people would rather make a decision because they're in pain versus them wanting to gain something. And that's exactly what this framework does. As a business owner, if you implement this discovery framework with your entire team, several things happen immediately. Number one, your reps stop asking you for help on the calls because they know exactly what to ask and actually how to move the conversation forward. Most importantly, why you ask the questions. Second, benefit number 2 is going to be your conversion rate is going to go way up because deals are going to close on momentum instead of stalling. Now, the third benefit is your reps are going to ramp up faster because they have a clear structure to follow instead of just trying to figure out what to do on each call and just asking random bullshit questions in discovery. Now, fourth, your hiring becomes way easier because you can train new reps on a repeatable process instead of hoping they figure it out through osmosis. And lastly, benefit number 5 is your revenue becomes way more predictable because it's no longer dependent on what happens on the call or whatever. If your reps are having a good day, they're following the same repeatable process. And if prospects are able to articulate their pain enough, your close rate is going to skyrocket. If your reps are struggling with both consistency and conversion, it's almost never a motivation issue. It's a discovery issue. So if you're a B2B founder trying to scale your sales team, fill out the type form below in the description, and we'll show you exactly how to extract and to install the frameworks that your reps need.